Fibra is a project funded by the European Commission under the 7th Framework Programme to link the research activities carried between Europe and China on fiber crops.
Fibra is a project that will create a link between Europe and China about the research activities on fiber crops. In China, there is a lot of things have been done of breeding and agronomy, while in Europe we have better situation on mechanization, harvesting and logistics. So we will exchange information on the area that we have our best experience. This is the main advancement of this crop that will collect a lot of information, and at the end of the project will create a long-term vision about the fiber crops in Europe and China.
The Fibra network has as main target to link the research activities carried out on both Europe and China, and to provide a long-term vision on future research activities on fiber crops and improve researchers' training opportunities.
For Europe, the most important bast fiber crops is hemp, flax and kenaf. Kenaf actually is not cultivated in a big area, only in pilot or demo fields. While flax is cultivated in many areas in Europe, also hemp is cultivated as a second crop and kenaf is the third crop. In China, we have a different picture. We have, apart from these crops, we have also rami and yurt. I forgot to mention that also that perennial grasses, that they are not typical fiber crops, are also important crops as fiber crops for the future. In Europe, the topics that need further research in Europe is the breeding and agronomy, especially the breeding. We need varieties that are for south and north of Europe. For many years, there is not a lot of improvement of genetic resources on these crops in Europe, while in China there is so much big progress.
APRE, in collaboration with the CRA, has organized the first workshop of Fibra project funded by FP7 of the European Commission. The first workshop is about agronomy and logistics in fiber crops.
The monoecious variety of hemp was already discovered very long time ago from Southeast East Europe. Now is used on French, and we have also one variety in Italy. His name is Carmaleonte.
Yeah, it's very important, first of all, to know the exact biomass potential of biomass crops. Still, we don't know at present what is the exact situation regarding the biomass potential of biomass crops, of fiber crops, I mean to say. And the second important factor is regarding the byproducts that could be obtained from these different types of fiber crops.
Well, you have to know that in France, hemp industry is a very little branch, so there is no question of competition for surface for hemp. But hemp isn't planted everywhere in France, and he is a good competitor with the other crops. So, in fact, the location is decided by the industrial groups where they want to have their factory, and often there are agricultural cooperative groups, so they plan and the location of the crops where they have agricultural interest.
Well, I think that's quite difficult answer to question to answer, and I think it's either way. It's political because if you consider that, for instance, recently the subsidy for processors of fibers in Europe have been banned. I mean, 2012 was the last year where the EU subsidy was available for the processors of the fiber. And then you have to consider that, for instance, it hasn't been stopped for the energy crops, which compete with fiber crops in Europe. So there is that's not economic way of making this kind of activities.
Well, this is a very interesting question, since the European Union is stressing on the fact that energy crops should be cultivated on marginal lands. However, this is there is no clear definition of marginal lands so far. In my opinion, marginal lands is a wide concept and very dynamic in space and on time. For example, marginal lands from economic point of view may be marginal for the distance to the market, but from agronomic point of view may be of good soil and very fertile, so not marginal. Perennial grasses have the characteristics to be drought resistant or cold resistant species, or to be grown on salinity or flooded soil. And in this respect, in the coming years, as happened for the food crops, research should focus on genetic improvement of these species in order to adapt them to the marginal environment of interest. Optima is coordinated by the University of Catania in the name of Professor Salvatore Cosentino, and is the acronym of the optimization of perennial grasses for biomass production in Mediterranean area. So is mostly devoted to species, biomass species, and their introduction in cultivation of marginal lands, mainly in Mediterranean area.
Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences was founded in 1958 in Hunan province. In 2001, the institute moved to Changsha City, the capital of Hunan province. The institute has 196 staff members, including 6 research divisions, which are Remy Division, Flax and Hemp Division, Jute and Cloth Division, Agro-Facilities Division, Processing Division, and Fiber Test Division. I think maybe in China, the most important know-how for farmers to improve the income is to get the new varieties for high productivity and for new cultivation technology, and we have to develop new harvesters. Yeah, and then after using the fiber, we were trying to provide the farmers to know how to use the byproducts for forage or for other purpose using.
First of all, let's say biomass and fiber crops store solar energy in a way that we can use it later. But to do so, they use a lot of resources like water and energy, and we need to increase the ratio between what we get and what we spend to make this biomass. And to increase the ratio, we need, first of all, to use all the material that come out from a biomass source or from fiber crops which means use also stalks or other parts that we are not using now in the processing units. We need to improve logistics that can have an impact of about, we can reduce cost of transport and logistics about 20-25% by, for example, having harvesting in one pass of the whole crops instead of harvesting in 2 or 3 passes. Condensing bales in a more dense way, which means we can basically increase by 20% transportation loads of trucks just by increasing compression of bale.
In China they have a rich history of hemp producing, they never stop producing. They have huge acreages of hemp and they make textiles out of it. So I think we can learn a lot from China, but on the other hand China can also learn a lot from Europe, because if you look at the hemp industry in China, it's very primitive, it's a lot of man-made labor work. So in Europe, on the contrary, it's a very mechanized way of hemp producing and processing. So I think both ways we can learn from each other, and my main interest is in their way of making textile out of hemp, because that's for us the biggest future.
In Europe, hemp was grown from many years, especially in Italy, where a very great experience in growing hemp in all Italy, but then in 1940 was abandoned. This was done due to the increasing of handling cost and social problems related to a very hard job related to detaching fiber from the stems. In the recent years, some activity started to try to develop a mechanical system to obtain fiber, textile fiber from hemp, and some experiments were done. But till now, there is not a commercial filière on fiber production for textile in Europe. We do have about 15,000 hectares of hemp, of which 12,000 hectares are grown in France, but they are grown for technical fiber.